Alrighty, let's take a look at this question. So we need to solve this quadratic inequality, x squared plus 6x is greater than or equal to 0. And with it being a quadratic, first thing we want to do is factor it. For this one, we can take out a greatest common factor of x, and that would leave in the brackets x plus 6 when we divide that out. Now, with any of these, you want to make sure you have 0 on one side before you start factoring, because there's no point in factoring if you don't have 0. Now, at this step, we want to set each factor equal to 0 to figure out where the quadratic would be 0. And then we're going to figure out where it's going to be positive or negative. Okay, so one of our zeros would be x equals 0, and the other one would be x plus 6 equals 0, so therefore x would equal negative 6. Now, really what we want to do is find out where it is greater than or equal to 0. That's the most important part there. So on the little number line I have here, we're going to put negative 6 and 0, mostly just to separate the number line into 3 pieces, but you do want to have the smaller one on the left there, the negative 6. And then we are going to basically figure out if each of the factors are positive or negative, and then the final result needs to be, as I circled in red, greater than or equal to 0. Okay, so it's really about this last line that's important, the result line. Okay, so if we sub in, say, a number less than negative 6 into the x factor, like negative 10, let's say, that would obviously be negative then, so we put a negative sign there. And then between negative 6 and 0, again, it would still be negative when you sub it into this x. And then greater than 0, it would be positive. Now, we're again pick numbers in each of those 3 regions to sub into x plus 6. So something less than negative 6, like negative 10, would be negative 10 plus 6, which would be negative 4, so negative. We put a negative there. Between negative 6 and 0, like say negative 2, negative 2 plus 6 would be positive 4, so we put a plus sign there. And then greater than 0, so like 2 or something, 2 plus 6 is 8, so that's positive. And there we go. Now, the most important line is the result. And the result is when you multiply those two things together, those two factors. So a negative times a negative is a positive. A negative times a positive would be negative. And then a positive times a positive would be positive. So we want to know where the result is greater than or equal to 0, meaning positive. So that would be here and here, the two ends, which means on the number line, that would correspond to these numbers here. So in red, we now describe what those numbers are. So for that chunk on the left there, we would have x would be less than, now whether we use the equal to or not depends on what the original sign was, and since we had greater than or equal to 0, that would mean we would also include negative 6. So less than or equal to negative 6 would be these numbers here on the number line. And then we go to these numbers on the number line, which would be x is greater than or equal to 0. And those two intervals would be our answers. So any numbers in those two regions, when subbed in for x in the original inequality, would give us a result that was greater than or equal to 0. And there we go. That's how you solve a quadratic inequality. Alrighty, hope that helped.